ENGAGE XR Holdings PLC is a virtual reality software company. It's listed in London and Ireland, and it has been there since 2018. Well, 4 years on, it's focused on the deployment of the metaverse. Well, to find out what that means for the metaverse, for the company and investors, we're joined by the Chief Executive, David Whelan. A warm welcome to you, David. But first of all, what is the metaverse? And what is your company's solution?
Yeah, so it's fantastic to be here. The metaverse is very simply the evolution of how we communicate online. So when you look at the internet today, the internet is flat pages full of text and it's video. So everything is very flat. So think about like reading a book, where the metaverse is, it's a 3D spatial location where it's like walking into a hotel lobby and walking around and physically meeting people and having conversations. So it's a different way to communicate and you really feel like you're in these locations. So each business or company in the future will have their own metaverse, which they completely control, which can be branded locations, could be museums, it could be stadiums, where you can go in and meet business representatives. And think of it very much like building a real life city. So imagine you're walking down High Street in London, and you see the HSBC building as an example. You as the public can walk into the lobby area, meet representatives, but then they might have private areas where they do business, kind of like up the elevator and into the meeting rooms. And that's what the metaverse is going to be like, where you physically walk around these locations.
But it sounds like the grown-up version of Minecraft to me. So who are your customers, and is my analogy wrong?
No, it's a really good analogy. So Minecraft's been around for 10, 15 years. So the kids who grew up on Minecraft are now going into business and starting to run their own businesses. So this is how the internet and how the metaverse evolves. The internet back in the day as well. Originally, it was between universities as a way of communication. Then it started to take off in video games when you had networked video games, and then it became a useful tool for business. The metaverse is very similar, where in the early days it was primarily video games and communication. Now it's going to evolve more and more into business, and we're providing a platform on Engage where businesses themselves in a framework where they can build whatever they want in their own likeness, and they can host it privately if they want. They can have the general public walk around inside the platform as well. So, and I think the word engage, we want it to become very synonymous with online communication, where people today say, hey, I'll Zoom you later or I'll Skype you later. In the next 3 years, we want people to say, hey, let's engage. And that's really where we want the platform to be.
Okay, so Meta has announced its plans for the metaverse. So how does what you offer differ?
So with Meta, when Mark Zuckerberg announced his plan, and I think it would have been about 12 months ago, he announced, hey, we have this giant platform where you can do everything. You can do dating, you can do education, you can do socializing. And it was a really large, grand vision, and it was very much tailored for a younger audience. And you could see that in the design, where the avatars are very cartoony in places, because he knows his audience. He is with Facebook as well. Like, you need new users coming on, you need younger users coming on, and they have a platform called Facebook Horizons, and that's really what they're pushing. Where we're coming from is that we see the metaverse very similar to the internet, where it won't just be one platform, it'll be a collection of different platforms providing different services. So you're going to have a metaverse for dating, you're going to have a metaverse for video games, you're going to have a metaverse for different applications. But when people talk about enterprise use cases and education, we want them talking about Engage. And the reason why we feel Engage is in a really good place is we are the only metaverse platform with ISO security certification. We have private hosting options for people, and we're not say we don't have a lot of trolls in the system. And what trolls are if you go into a lot of those other platforms, and there's quite a few of them out there, they were primarily based on video games and designed for kids. Very quickly, when you're inside one of those metaverse platforms, you're going to be standing next to a 12 or 14-year-old kid screaming abuse at you, and it's crazy, whereas we've come from an education background originally, where security has been a huge, a huge concern for us. We've designed a platform around security and features where people can feel very, very safe. So this is why companies like HTC and Kia and Fidelity and 3M are using us for professional events, and even Facebook themselves use us for professional events as well, which I think is very telling.
So I'm just wondering how you're going to address the security concerns that you've brought up there. I mean, do you need a whole team of moderators, or can this be done by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can be done, which is very automated. So one of the key things you can do is when you're in the metaverse, there's a digital representation of you, a virtual version of you walking around inside the virtual space. So what you can do is set boundaries. So if you're within 2 or 3 feet of somebody, you can actually make your avatar and that person's avatar disappear. So they're never, in really close contact, so you don't invade someone's personal boundary. Another thing you can do as well is you can turn off VoIP communication for free users if you want, or you can actually ban users from your own meta world. But one of the key things that I think is going to come is with NFTs. So there's a lot of publicity right now about NFTs, cryptocurrency. They're not all the same thing. It's not all the metaverse. They can be utilized within the metaverse, but it's not the metaverse. The metaverse is a new way of communicating. But where NFTs will be valuable is the technology for verification. So me as a virtual avatar, when I go into Engage or when I go into different meta world spaces, people recognize me because they can see my avatar. They know it's me. And the last thing that I want is somebody copying my avatar and then going into the metaverse and then saying all crazy racist stuff. The same as having maybe an evil twin in the physical world going off doing a load of crazy stuff and me getting the blame for it. Where NFTs can become very valuable is when you log into the metaverse and you could use your camera, or there's eye tracking in some of these headsets, you could do a facial scan and it can recognize, hey, this is David sitting at this terminal. Let's go and fetch his avatar, which is an NFT on the blockchain, and then verified and then brought onto the metaverse. So I know there's only one version of my avatar walking around. So that's one way where NFTs can be very valuable. Whereas I think this trick of buying clip art and JPEGs for $50,000 or $100,000, that's crazy money. That's not really adding any value.
So there's a lot of investors watching and listening to this interview. So what are you saying to them? Are you telling them to embrace the tech associated with NFTs, but don't buy them?
The tech behind NFTs is very important. Like we've seen, one of the first use cases has been digital art, but buying digital art is very different, so a JPEG and a copy of a JPEG is exactly the same. There really is no difference, whereas when you buy a real life painting up on a wall, and then someone takes a photograph of that painting, it's nice that you have the photograph and it looks similar, but the painting is different because you can see the texture and you can feel feel the texture. That's the difference between a real life physical art installation and an NFT. Even with cryptocurrency as well, I know it's very volatile at the moment. It's very hard to base your business on a cryptocurrency where the volatility is massive, whereas you could wipe off 50% or 90% of the value of the business if it's all based on cryptocurrency very quickly, based on maybe Elon Musk putting a tweet out and saying, hey, go buy one cryptocurrency over another. However, the technology behind it is really important. When you can walk into a physical shop location like Starbucks as an example and buy a cup of coffee, or use it for everyday services, and cryptocurrency becomes very stable, absolutely that's going to be the currency of choice in the metaverse in the future between different worlds, because it doesn't matter where you're located in the world. The same as online, if you have a standardized currency that's accepted globally, that's the one that's going to win out.
But what you're offering doesn't allow people to go anywhere physically and buy a cup of coffee. So I'm just wondering, the metaverse, it allows people to be able to engage in virtual workplaces. Is that good for mental well-being? And, what about obesity issues?
Yeah, so there's actually lots of fitness apps in virtual reality as well, and VR. And VR isn't the metaverse either. VR is just a way that you can connect into the metaverse. But if you are using a VR headset, you're actually standing up, you're walking around, you're active, you're shaking people's hands. You're not sitting down in a chair all day, looking at a video camera and just answering emails. You are quite a lot more active. But I think one of the greatest benefits for using VR or virtual spaces is actually in the psychology of your workforce. So with 3M as an example, 3M came to us at the height of COVID, and they had an issue with new employees not feeling like they were part of the organization, and they were churning through a lot of new employees. And the reason being is that they didn't have that office connection where, new employees would come into the office, they would feel like they're part of the organization, and they'd make friends and they'd end up staying at the company long term. Whereas what was happening when the interview was done over Zoom and they were just answering emails, they felt they were a number and they weren't valued, as an employee. Whereas what 3M have created is a metaverse called 3M Home, where they've onboarded a lot of their new employees through 3M Home. To get like a better feel for the company. And actually, as part of 3M Home, you start off in a cave, and you see these two 3M employees mining a mineral, and the mineral turns to dust, and they're there scratching their head, going, "What are we going to do with this?" And one of them picks up the dust and puts it on some sticky paper, and they invent sandpaper. So that was the birth of the company. And as you walk through the cave, you meet HR representatives who are logged in, and they guide you through the experience. And then you meet other new employees, so they actually get that onboarding experience, which really helps. And then they do stand-ups and meetings inside virtual reality as well, the same as most of my meetings actually with my staff. We've when the pandemic started, we had about 45 or 50 staff. Today we have 110 staff, but I haven't met any of these new staff physically. We meet them all every day in VR, do our stand-up sessions and our planning meetings, so it really helps. I think the psychology of the workers, they feel a lot happier and they feel more connected than just being on a Zoom screen every day.
And it also sounds very good for their core strength as well. But you've been mentioning a lot of company names that I'm not familiar with, which makes me wonder about the competition. Do you consider that there is credible competition to what you do?
Competition is fantastic. Everybody has a different idea about what the metaverse is going to be in the future. So you put 10 so-called metaverse experts in a room, they'll give you 10 different answers for what the metaverse is going to be in the future. No one really knows, which is what's exciting about this space. But we are making a bet where, I think there's going to be more remote work in the future. They're going to need better ways of communication than video. Education as well is broken in many ways, where the best educators in the world are only accessible to rich people. I know we're very lucky living in the UK and Ireland, where our education system is really, really strong. But if you live in the USA and you want to go to university, it's going to cost you $300,000 to get a university education. So a lot of people end up joining the military to get an education. That's a broken system. Having access to some of the greatest educators. As an example, you could do physics in virtual MIT in the morning, and then English literature in Oxford University in the afternoon from the comfort of your own home at a fraction of the cost. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to see in the metaverse. We're going to see professional services and events as well. So a lot of the events that were cancelled during COVID, a lot of these events are trying to come back, but a lot of the smaller events cannot come back because they didn't have enough money to last. So you'll have some of the bigger events, but these events can be held in VR, and that's what we've been running on quite a regular basis, where you can get up and physically walk around a virtual exhibit hall and have a private hallway conversation with a sales representative or someone else from another business. That's something you can't do on video, where the video events were 1,000 people logged in all watching a PowerPoint presentation. That's not why people go to events. It's those one-off conversations which spark business. That's something that we've shown that we can do, on a weekly basis on the platform.
So that sounds very inclusive, but do you include or exclude the regulators? Regulators are always two steps behind. I'm just wondering, in terms of regulation, are regulators investigating what you do? Could this be a challenge to growth, or are you educating the regulators?
We are educating the regulators as well. So what we're providing here is different. So we're not gathering or harvesting data, from users on the platform. What we're providing is a service for enterprise clients to build their own meta worlds, whatever way they see fit. So as an example, if you were going to online banking and you're signing up for the terms and conditions, and there's a level of security with online banking, and you're using the service on the website, the same way we could provide a banking service to any business in the world where they can have a metaverse bank where you can physically walk into and sit down with a representative and ask them about mortgage services. You know, it's the people who build these metaverses. They will regulate themselves and how they deal with their customers' data. You know, we're not there to advertise to people. We're actually there to, provide platforms, meaningful platforms for people to generate revenue through the metaverse. And the way they'll generate revenue is if you're holding a professional event, you can charge a fee for that event. We'll take a percentage of that. If you want to provide professional services or subscription services to access a meta world, like in the education settings, again, we will take a percentage of that transaction as well. Or if you're selling 3D objects or locations, again, we can take a percentage. So there's lots of ways that this will generate revenues for the business in the long term. But really, we're at the foundation steps right now where we're educating businesses as well as regulators on this is how we see the metaverse going, and here's what people are doing today. And we have some fantastic clients, as I was saying, 3M, Unilever, Kia, BMW, Fidelity Investments, BMW. These are really large organizations who are using Engage services, on a very regular basis.
Right. So you're talking about revenue generation there. I'm just wondering ultimately how investors can make money. Is your business cash generative, or is everything being sunk into development costs at this stage of your tech's evolution?
No, we're generating revenue, and the revenue is accelerating, and it will continue to accelerate into the future. And I think the conversations that we're having now are very similar to the conversations of when the internet, was becoming popular in the late 90s. People were scratching their heads going, how are we going to make money out of this? And almost every job today is associated some way on the internet. You get delivery services, you have e-commerce. This will be the same way. There'll be e-commerce through the metaverse as well, but instead of just a shopping page, it'll be a shopping experience where you might go into a BMW showroom, as an example, sit in the car, have a look around, maybe take it for a virtual spin, before you actually go into maybe a real showroom and sit down in the real car. So you're giving people different experiences that maybe they could not access, or maybe it's a Ferrari car as an example, where people have aspirations to own a Ferrari at some stage, but hey, maybe you're going to drive around the virtual version first.
I want to know a little bit about you. You're obviously proudly Irish. You've given a hat tip to the Irish education system, but how did the business start? I mean, I know you were the last company to list on the Irish Stock Exchange before it was integrated into Euronext. So I'm just wondering whether you have the luck of the Irish, but how did it start? Who believed in you?
You make your own luck, you just have to be in the right place, and then you have to execute once an opportunity arrives. So in my own background, I was absolutely broke 8-9 years ago after the recession. So I had a web development company, and when 2008 hit, there was nobody making new websites or branding or anything like that. We actually started, myself and my wife started the business on a €1,000 loan from my sister. So when the original Oculus Rift, which is a VR headset, went on Kickstarter, a prototype of it, that week I happened to have $200-300. I sponsored the Kickstarter, and I got a development kit. And as soon as I put it on my face, I turned around to my wife Sandra and said, "This is the future. This is going to be massive. I need to get into it in some way." And I tried to make my own VR app. But I'm a really poor not web developer, really poor programmer, and I tried to make an app and it was rubbish. So I went back to what I do best, which was creating websites, and I created a content review website called Virtual Reality Reviewer, which got me in contact with all the leading players in America. And as I was reviewing content, I was looking at it going, right, these roller coasters and zombie shooters, they're interesting, but this is so much more. And I pitched an idea to one of the developers to make an education experience called Apollo 11. And I asked him how much would it cost to create a demo, and he said it would be $10,000. I didn't have €100 in the bank, so I went off and I got a loan of $1,000 to buy assets for him to create the first prototype demo. And he sent me back a really rough version of it. And when I got it, I put it on Kickstarter, and that's how we got our initial 40,000 euros within 30 days, and it became a global bestseller. It's after selling over 250,000 copies to date and generating millions for the business. But that was really the beginning of the business. So we've really grown quickly. And as you said, yes, we we're the last company ever to list on the Irish Stock Exchange before it changed over to Euronext, and we listed on in London in about three and a half, 4 years ago. So it's been an interesting journey to say the least.
Have you paid your sister back yet?
I have, but I look after. There's no worries about that. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and it's it's not all smooth sailing either. There's humps and along the way, but we definitely get through things anyway. So you learn along the way.
I'm just wondering if what you've learned in the last 4 years is preparing you to transcend to another listing, perhaps in the US, where I know you're targeting growth.
It could be a possibility. It's not something we've looked at seriously yet, but it's the US obviously is a place where tech companies are very much followed. I know here in the UK and in Europe as well, tech companies can sometimes struggle a little bit, but we are funded right now, and we are growing as well. We do have a path to profitability, so who knows what the future is going to bring.
You've mentioned your wife, Sandra, you mentioned your sister, but great entrepreneurs need mentors. They also need retail and institutional backing. Do you have plenty of both?
We do actually. Most of our investment has come from institutional investors. Octopus Investments actually one of the bigger ones. Special shout out to those guys. They've really backed us. From the very beginning, been a very strong supporter. Shard Capital as well have been a very strong supporter from us. But I think when I went over to pitch, to list on the London Stock Exchange originally, and when I walk into the presenters' rooms, I definitely think I'm very different to maybe a lot of the polished presentations they would see. If somebody asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I'll just be hands up straight. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not going to try give them a BS answer at all. So I do think they like that honesty, and they back the person. Because when I was walking into those guys in 2018, 2019, they were going, "Who's this crazy Irish guy like living in the arse end of nowhere with this crazy idea? I don't even know what the metaverse is." And that's what I was pitching 4 years ago. But now the market is coming to us. So what I've been saying the last 5, 6 years even, and what we've been building up to over the last 3 or 4 years, now people are starting to see it, and now they're starting to see the market. So like in the next 3 years, it's going to be massive, the metaverse, and how many metaverse companies are out there, and how many can you invest in? There's not that many, and I think a lot of the hype we've seen around these metaverse platforms where they're selling virtual land at huge exorbitant prices, that's crazy. Like imagine 25 years ago if Tim, who invented the internet, another UK guy, if he turned around and said there'll only ever be 1,000 domains on the internet, very quickly 3 or 4 of the biggest businesses in the world would own all the internet. That's what we're seeing with some of these metaverse platforms right now. We're not, anybody can go on the metaverse. You can build your own business in the metaverse. Why would you stifle opportunity by limiting the amount of space on the metaverse? And that's something that we're very much dead set against.
I hear what you're saying in very plain English, but I'm just wondering about the market. The market is being buffeted by the very real and present danger of recession. Is your company in the tech recession proof?
Well, it's not affecting us yet anyway. I'll put it that way. We're actually accelerating. We're getting busier. So we're hiring more staff as things stand to make sure that we can actually, keep up with demand. A lot of these businesses are looking for ways to reduce costs, and one of the ways to reduce costs is to hire remote staff, in less expensive places. Because when you hire staff in London, you have to pay them a certain amount so they can live in London, because the rents there are absolutely, massive. Whereas again with the 3M example, when you can hire people in anywhere in the world, but you still want to make them feel like they're part of the organization, using a metaverse for onboarding and for communication really makes sense. The same with events as well. So a lot of these companies might have had budgets to spend on sending their marketing people around to events, but those events are very expensive. Like even for a small startup, an event in say Bet Conference as an example for a small stall there. I went there a few years ago. That cost us €100,000. That's a lot of money, for a lot of companies. Whereas if they can hold a virtual event at a fraction of the cost, but actually get the same output from it, where they've sparked up new business, that's where they're going to look at metaverse platforms. So there's a lot of opportunity for us, and I think there'll be continued opportunity, accelerated opportunity, actually, in fact, in the next couple of years.
I've got two more questions for you, David. Do you use your own tech to engage with investors? Can investors watch an investor presentation using your tech?
Yeah, I've given a couple of investor presentations already inside ENGAGE, but certainly we can invite people in for live presentations. When I went around pitching actually our platform to our investors, I was going around with a VR headset, and I'd only talk to people for maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and I go, look, I can talk all day, but until you try it, you're not going to understand. And I sticking them in the headset, and the presentation actually happened inside virtual reality. Now, at that stage, we didn't have the Oculus Quest, which is a very small headset which you can put in your bag. I was going around with a PC with a cable connected to it, and a headset as well, and it was taking me ages to set up. But yeah, absolutely, like most of my meetings, I would say 90% of my meetings are actually in VR.
So what is the long-term ambition? I don't like the word final. So what's the long-term ambition? Is it a Musk buyout?
I'm not even thinking about buyout right now. I want to disrupt all global communication. I want to disrupt. We shouldn't be having this interview on video platform. We should be doing it in VR, or let's engage. That's really where I want to be. Where when people talk about communication, I want people to say, I'll engage with you later. That's the aim of the company right now. And I do want to make sure that the metaverse is very accessible to everybody, creatives, businesses, educators. Everybody should have a stake in the metaverse the same as they can on the internet. But I do think that we should learn from some of the mistakes on the internet as well, where there's a lot of hate speech and there's a lot of really bad stuff that can happen on the internet. I do think we have an opportunity now to reset, and make sure that the metaverse is a very safe place for business and kids to enjoy in the future.
I look forward to our next interview then. Who knows where we will be? David Whelan, Chief Executive of ENGAGE XR Holdings PLC. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sarah.